Some things are never meant to be discovered, but curiosity has a way of digging up horrors we were never meant to understand. Tonight, I'll tell you a story that should have never been told. A story that began as an experiment and ended as something far worse. If you listen closely, you might hear it too. Welcome to Eerie Short and Scary Stories. And whatever you do, don't look behind you. I was never one to buy into creepy internet stories. You know the ones: haunted video games, lost TV episodes, strange broadcasts that supposedly vanished without a trace. Just clickbait and hoaxes, right? That's what I thought too. Until I heard about Dead Bart. Until I saw it for myself. It started one night when I was scrolling through old Simpsons trivia, just looking for something interesting. Hidden jokes, cutscenes, behind-the-scenes drama. Nothing too unusual. But then I came across a thread buried deep in a forum, talking about an episode that didn't officially exist. An episode that Matt Groening himself refused to discuss. They called it Dead Bart. And the way people spoke about it, it wasn't like some silly creepypasta. They weren't laughing. They weren't exaggerating. They were warning. At first, I thought it was just some internet myth that got out of hand. A few blurry screenshots, a couple of vague stories, nothing concrete. But the deeper I read, the more uneasy I felt. People described the episode as wrong. Not just disturbing, but fundamentally broken. Like it was never meant to be seen. Like it had slipped through some crack in reality where it didn't belong. And the ones who had watched it? They all said the same thing: they regretted it. I should have closed the tab. I should have moved on. But there was something about the way they described it, something in the hushed, almost fearful way they warned others not to seek it out. And of course, that only made me want to see it more. So I started searching. Really searching. I went through old archives, obscure websites, even some places on the internet I probably shouldn't have been poking around in. Most of what I found was nonsense. People claiming they had a copy, only to lead to dead links or sketchy downloads filled with viruses. It was frustrating, but I wasn't about to give up. Not when I was this close. Then, one night, I got a message. No username. No profile picture. Just a plain, unmarked account that had somehow found me. The message was simple: you don't want this. No context. No explanation. Just those 4 words. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Someone knew what I was looking for. And somehow, they knew I was getting close. I should have listened. I should have let it go. But instead, I did exactly what I wasn't supposed to do. I replied. I told myself it was just a myth. A weird little story passed around online. Nothing more. But I couldn't shake it. Every time I tried to move on, I kept thinking about those forum posts, about the way people talked about the episode, as if watching it had changed something in them. As if they had seen something they were never supposed to see. And that kind of fear, it doesn't come from nowhere. So I kept searching. I went through pages and pages of old discussions, most of them deleted or locked. The deeper I looked, the more I realized how hard someone, or something, was trying to bury it. Posts that mentioned Dead Bart would disappear overnight. Accounts that claimed to have seen it would go inactive. Threads would end abruptly, sometimes with nothing but a vague message like, "Don't ask about this again." And I wasn't the only one who noticed. A few users had left warnings, saying the more you searched, the more it felt like something was watching you back. I should have stopped there. I should have taken the hint. But it was too late for that. By then, I wasn't just curious. I needed to know. I needed to understand why people were so afraid of this episode. So I pushed forward. I searched through archives, old message boards, even obscure private trackers. Most links were dead ends, but then I found one that wasn't. A single post, buried in an abandoned forum, with nothing but a link and the words 7G44 before. 7G44. That wasn't just any file name. That was the missing production code. The one episode that was supposed to be lost. I hesitated. My hands were cold. My heart was pounding. Everything in me was screaming not to click. But I had come too far. I had to see it. So I took a breath, ignored the warning in the back of my mind, and I clicked. At first, I thought it was just another weird, low-quality rip of an old episode. The kind you find on sketchy websites, compressed to hell, colors faded, audio slightly distorted. The intro played like normal, but something was wrong. The music sounded distant, almost hollow, like it had been recorded through an old speaker in an empty room. The animation wasn't quite right either. The lines were shaky, uneven. The colors, dull, lifeless, drained of the usual warmth. And yet, despite all that, I kept watching. The episode opened at an airport. The Simpson family was boarding a plane, heading somewhere. No explanation, no setup, just static shots of them walking through the terminal. Nobody spoke. Even the background characters barely moved. It felt unfinished, like an early storyboard that someone had tried to pass off as a final product. But it wasn't just the animation. It was the silence. No music, no background chatter, just the occasional muffled footstep or distorted crackle of an intercom. It made my skin crawl, but I couldn't stop. Then, the plane took off. Bart, being Bart, was restless. He fidgeted in his seat, played with the tray table, pressed his face against the window. Then, suddenly, he started punching it. Light at first like a joke. Then harder. And harder. The animation here was different. Hyper-realistic, almost unsettlingly so. The reflection in the glass was too detailed, the sound of his fist hitting it too sharp. And then, without warning, the window shattered. The change was instant. The cabin depressurized. Everything blurred as objects flew past the screen. The camera angle shifted to an almost first-person perspective, shaky and disorienting. There was no screaming, no music, just the deafening rush of wind as Bart was sucked out of the plane. His small body twisted, flailed, tumbled downward. The sky darkened. His expression, pure terror. It wasn't cartoonish. It wasn't exaggerated. It looked real. Too real. Then, just as he was about to hit the ground, black screen. Silence. No transition, no fade out. Just pure, crushing silence. Then, the next scene. The Simpson family, sitting at their dinner table. But they weren't eating. They weren't speaking. They just sat there, staring at their plates. Their eyes, empty. Hollow. Sunken. Marge's face was pale, almost gray. Homer's expression was blank, his mouth slightly open, as if he had forgotten how to speak. Lisa's hands trembled. Maggie's pacifier wasn't moving. They sat like that for what felt like forever. I checked the time. It had only been a minute. It felt like an hour. And then the screen flickered. Static. And when the image returned, they were in a cemetery. Rows and rows of graves stretched into the distance, the sky above them a sickly shade of red. The wind howled, but the trees didn't move. The family stood before a single headstone. The name was smudged, distorted. The date, years ahead of the episode's supposed air date. Marge was holding something. A framed photo. The camera zoomed in slowly. It was Bart. Not a drawing of him. A photograph. A real, grainy, black and white photograph of a child who looked exactly like Bart Simpson. His eyes, lifeless. His mouth, slightly open, like he had been caught mid-scream. I wanted to stop. I wanted to turn it off, close the window, delete the file. But I couldn't move. My hands felt frozen to the keyboard. The air in my room was heavy, suffocating. My screen flickered again. and then they showed his body. I've watched horror movies, played disturbing games, even sat through those awful shock videos people send as a joke. But nothing could have prepared me for this. Bart's body was sprawled in the grass, limbs bent at unnatural angles, his face frozen in an expression I can't even describe. The animation. It wasn't animation anymore. It was something else. The details were too precise, too grotesque. Skin that looked real, with bruises blooming like ink stains. Eyes that were open but saw nothing. Blood that wasn't just red, it had texture, depth, like it had seeped into the ground beneath him. I felt sick, but I couldn't look away. Then the episode cut to black. For a second, I thought it was over. Maybe that was it, some disturbing lost media prank, meant to shock and disgust. But then, the screen lit up again. 1 year later. The Simpsons, at a cemetery. Everything looked wrong. I don't know how to explain it. The art style was the same, but the way it was used made the whole scene feel decayed. The grass was dry, brittle. The sky was an ugly, washed-out gray. The trees were bare, twisted, like they had been sketched in with shaking hands. The gravestones weren't clean and simple like they usually were in the show. They were cracked, covered in filth, some leaning at odd angles as if they had been abandoned for years. And the family, they looked worse than before. Sunken faces, hollow eyes, moving as if they were being dragged through the scene rather than animated. They stood in front of Bart's grave. No dialogue, just silence. I kept waiting for something, anything, to break the tension. A joke. A single word. Even a sound effect. But nothing came. They just stood there, staring. And then, slowly, the camera panned away from them, moving through the cemetery. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The names on the tombstones weren't just random. I recognized them. They were real names. Real people. Some had already passed away, but others were still alive. At least, they were at the time this episode was supposedly made. That's when I felt it. The first real stab of fear. This wasn't just some messed up lost episode. This was something else entirely. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. My hands were shaking. I wanted to close the window, but I couldn't move. I just sat there, staring at the screen, as the list of names kept going. More and more. Some I knew. Some I didn't. And then, my screen flickered. The episode cut to black, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. It had to be over. There was nothing left to show. Nothing left to do. Just emptiness on the screen and the dull hum of my computer fan. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to close the window. And then... Bart's face appeared. Not the Bart I grew up with. Not the one from reruns and Halloween specials. This was something else. Something wrong. His skin looked too real, like an actual photograph, but warped in a way that made my stomach twist. His hair was matted, uneven. His lips were cracked, stretched into something that wasn't quite a smile. But his eyes were the worst part. They weren't eyes at all. Just deep, empty pits. Blacker than black. The kind of darkness that felt like it had depth, like if I stared too long, I'd fall in. I wanted to turn away, but I couldn't. I was frozen. Then my speakers crackled. A sharp, static hiss that made my whole body tense. And underneath it, a voice. A whisper, low and rasping, like it had traveled through layers of distortion just to reach me. It was Bart's voice, but older. Wrong. And it said 2 words. See you soon. The screen flashed. My monitor flickered once, twice, and then nothing. My computer shut off completely. No warning. Just instant darkness. The kind that makes you realize how alone you are in the room. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the blank screen, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I don't know how long I stayed like that. A minute, an hour. It felt like forever. When I finally found the courage to move, my hands were trembling. I reached out, pressed the power button, half expecting it not to respond. But it did. My computer whirred back to life like nothing had happened. No error messages. No signs of a crash. Just a normal startup. For a second, I thought maybe it was all in my head. That maybe I had fallen asleep at my desk and dreamed the whole thing. But then I checked my files. The video was gone. Not in the recycle bin. Not buried in some obscure folder. It was just erased. Like it had never been there in the first place. My search history, my downloads, every trace of it was wiped clean. If someone else had been watching, they'd think I was lying. That there was never a Dead Bart episode. Never a file named 7G44.mp4. Never anything at all. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And worst of all, I know it saw me too. I spent hours searching. Days. Maybe even weeks. It consumed me. Every time I sat in front of my screen, I found myself digging through old forums, archived pages, anything that might prove I hadn't imagined it. But every trace of the episode was gone. The threads where people had talked about Dead Bart vanished. Any mentions of 7G44? Scrubbed clean. Even the forum itself, the one where I first found the link, had been shut down. No explanation. No warning. Just gone. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. Maybe an old site finally going offline. Maybe some administrator deciding to clean house. But deep down, I knew better. Something didn't want that episode to be found. And worse, it didn't want anyone talking about it. I tried to move on. Tried to forget. But how do you forget something that doesn't feel like a memory? It felt real. Like something had reached through my screen and left a mark I couldn't see, but could feel. I stopped watching The Simpsons. Even flipping past it on TV made my stomach turn. Every time I saw Bart's face, the real Bart, the one everyone else knew, I felt that thing staring back at me. Like it was waiting. Then, weeks later, I found the email. It was buried in my spam folder, sitting there like it had been waiting for me to open it. No subject line. No sender. Just a blank message with 2 words in the center of the screen. 7G44 lives. I don't know why, but my hands went cold. It wasn't possible. The file was gone. The forums were gone. Everything was gone. But someone, something, knew I had watched it. And they wanted me to know it wasn't over. I deleted the email. Closed my laptop. Told myself it was some stupid prank, someone messing with me. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that I was meant to see it. That I wasn't just a random person who stumbled across the episode. That maybe I was chosen. I still see Bart's face in my dreams. Sometimes it's just a flash, his empty eyes, his twisted smile. Other times, he's there, whispering something I can't understand. And then there are the nights when I wake up, heart pounding, convinced I heard it again. That voice. That awful, rasping whisper. See you soon. Maybe it was all in my head. Maybe I spent too much time searching, too much time obsessing, until I started seeing things that weren't there. Maybe the human mind has a way of making connections where none exist, filling in the blanks with horror when it can't find the truth. That would be the logical explanation, right? That would be the safe answer. But if that were true, then why does it keep happening? Why do I still hear the static whispering to me at night? Why do I wake up at exactly 3:17 a.m., drenched in sweat, convinced I heard my computer turn on by itself? Why does my TV flicker to life on its own, the screen stuck on nothing but dead air, just long enough for me to swear I see something move in the distortion. I've tried to tell myself it's paranoia, that I'm letting a stupid lost episode creep into my head, turning shadows into shapes, noise into voices. But deep down, I don't believe that. And if you ever find yourself in my position, you won't either. Maybe one day, someone else will find it. Maybe they'll stumble across a forgotten link, a corrupted file, a VHS tape in some dusty thrift store. Maybe they'll press play, thinking it's just another creepy internet legend. And maybe, just maybe, it'll be waiting for them the way it waited for me. I can't stop you. I can't make you believe me. All I can do is warn you. If you ever come across a strange Simpsons episode labeled 7G44, don't watch it. Don't download it. Close your laptop. Shut off your TV. Walk away and never look back. And if, by some terrible chance, you ever hear Bart whispering to you through the static, run. Stories have a way of lingering, don't they? The ones that get under your skin. The ones that creep into your thoughts long after you've turned off the lights. You tell yourself it's just a story. Just words. Just pixels on a screen. But then, in the silence of the night, when the world is still and your mind starts to wander, you start to wonder, what if? What if there's more to it than just fiction? What if some things slip through the cracks, things that were never meant to be seen? What if, somewhere out there, a corrupted file is still floating around, waiting for the right person to find it? And what if that person is you? You don't have to believe me. You can tell yourself it's just another creepy tale, nothing more. But if you ever feel like something is watching you from the darkness, if you ever catch a whisper in the static that sounds just a little too real, if you ever find yourself staring at a screen, unable to move, unable to look away, as something on the other side stares right back, remember this moment. Remember this warning. And remember to stay safe. Stay out of the static. And if you want more stories, ones that linger, ones that make you question what's real, then you know what to do. This is Eerie Short and Scary Stories, signing off.